Well, Tennessee has made it official, the hiring of Kelsey Pope to coach the wide receivers. Who is Kelsey Pope? We'll tell you here on a Twitter Tuesday edition of Locked On Vols.
You are Locked On Vols, your daily podcast on the Tennessee Volunteers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome into a Tuesday edition of Locked On Vols. Glad to have you guys along for the ride. Today's episode is brought to you by RunYourPool. March Madness is here, and RunYourPool has a better way to create your brackets. That's at RunYourPool.com, the premier sports pool hosting service. That is RunYourPool.com. I'm Eric Kane, your host here on Locked On Vols. Again, thanks so much for making Locked On Vols your first listen each and every day. Thanks so much for subscribing to YouTube and supporting the show there. We're almost at 600 subscribers, so I can't thank you guys enough for that. Like I said in the cold open, we'll hit a little Twitter Tuesday. We'll discuss who is Kelsey Pope, Tennessee's new wide receiver coach, and a couple of odds and ends in segment number 3, including the plan for what would have been a spring football game this year. Spoilers, that's not going to happen in the traditional sense. So we'll have all the details coming up later in the show. But first, who was Kelsey Pope? Well, Kelsey Pope is now Tennessee's new wide receivers coach. And you might have kind of recognized his name a little bit. He's been in an off-the-field staff role as an analyst for Josh Heupel his first year here on Rocky Top. The big thing about Kelsey Pope is he was interviewing to be the wide receivers coach at UCF before Josh Heupel left Orlando to come to Knoxville. And as we know, he hired Cody Burns and then took the job here at Knoxville 2 weeks later and brought Cody Burns with him. So I don't know if Kelsey Pope was his number 2, but he thought enough about Kelsey Pope and liked Kelsey Pope enough to where he offered him an off-the-field role at the University of Tennessee as an offensive analyst. And when you do that, a lot of times for these younger guys, it's kind of a stepping stone. You're waiting for this opportunity just like this. When a staff position opens, potentially you will go internally and look at those analyst roles and promote from within, or when a job on a coaching staff opens up elsewhere. If you're in an analyst role, for a team in the Southeastern Conference and it's a clear, stepping stone, that's good enough to get you a job most of the time somewhere else. Now, there's also the fired coaches that go and be analysts at other coaches or other stops around the SEC. Butch Jones, you've got tons of other former SEC coaches who have done the same thing, and that's a little bit different. That's kind of a wait and see mode, and them waiting around for another opportunity until they become a head coach again. So you've seen that happen as well. But for Kelsey Pope, he was sitting there as an off the field analyst role, but that doesn't mean he wasn't very instrumental in what Tennessee did this past season. Now, he coached them every single day in practice. He had a role there at game days. He just wasn't an on the field coach per se, but now that will change as he's being promoted to Tennessee's wide receivers coach. A little bit of a background on who Kelsey Pope is. So he played football at Samford, broke a couple of school records there. I think his senior year was in 2013. Had a cup of coffee in the NFL, went to a couple of teams, but nonetheless decided he wanted to get into coaching. Got his coaching career started at Tennessee Tech, left Tennessee Tech, and then he was the wide receivers coach and passing game coordinator at Gardner-Webb. And from Gardner-Webb is when he applied to be the wide receivers coach at UCF and then ultimately wound up at Tennessee. So the resume is not too long. We'll talk a little bit more about the resume and what that kind of means. I think the big thing here was this the first choice for Josh Heupel in trying to replace Cody Burns at wide receiver? No, I don't believe it was. I mean, he interviewed a couple of different guys. There were some feelers out there for a number of different guys in the Power 5 ranks. Obviously, you would feel better if you brought in a guy with a lot more experience, especially a lot more recruiting experience. But I wouldn't say this is a bad hire. I mean, this is a guy that comes internally from your staff within, a guy that knows your system, a guy that knows the expectations of practice, a guy that knows how those meetings are supposed to be ran. And it's a guy that's worked with the wide receivers the past year. He worked with Velus Jones Jr., who's going to be a draft selection. He worked with Javonte Payton, who came over and scored 7 touchdowns this past year. He worked with Cedric Tillman every single day in practice, and he had over 60 receptions and over 10 touchdowns, and was one of the SEC's best spots at wide receiver, bright spots at wide receiver. He was a big part in having 2 receivers for the University of Tennessee record 60-plus receptions in 1 year under Josh Heupel. So is this a home run hire? Absolutely not. Is this a bad hire? I don't think you characterize it as a bad hire either. It's just Kelsey Pope is, kind of what it is, and this is a familiarity hire. If I would say it so, one shape or another. I think Josh Heupel obviously thinks a lot of Kelsey Pope again for not hiring him at UCF, but thinking enough of him to bring him to the University of Tennessee. Obviously sees a future in Kelsey Pope. Tennessee put out a video of Heupel introducing Kelsey Pope to the team as the new wide receivers coach, and the team is thrilled. That's usually the reaction you get from whenever there's an internal hire made or somebody promoted from within. That's usually the reception you get because, the team knows them. The team usually loves them. I don't think they'd hire a guy that the team didn't really like. So looks like the team's really excited about it. And, how is this going to affect recruiting? Well, that's a big question. Kelsey Pope's obviously had a hand in recruiting this past year since Heupel's been here to Knoxville. Me calling recruits all the time and working the recruiting trail. I haven't heard his name mentioned an awful lot. That doesn't mean he's not out there working. That doesn't mean he's not out there doing his job in whatever capacity that Heupel has him doing in the recruiting ranks. But I'm intrigued to see how Kelsey Pope will recruit because, as we know, you got to recruit in order to be alive here in the SEC. So a lot of people wanted a recruiter to fill this spot. A lot of people wanted a coach to fill this spot. You're getting Kelsey Pope, and we'll see exactly what happens here. It's a lot of my friends shot me a text saying LOL at this hire, or what are they thinking about this hire? I mean, let's be real, guys. Okay, it's March and it's a wide receivers coaching hire. Who the heck they gonna get, right? I know you're the University of Tennessee. You can make some calls. You can go and get a lot of people. And again, they did their due diligence and they interviewed some people and they talked to some people and all that. But keep in mind too, the coaching carousel's already stopped. All the head coaches are already in place. When Cody Burns left, it was a late departure going to the NFL. And so a lot of these coaches have already, settled down and put some roots into where they're going to be for the next year. I'm not saying that's not the reason you settled on Kelsey Pope, but it is just kind of is what it is. The timing was a little bit different. So overall, I think this is fine. We'll have to see exactly, how it transpires. But I do think that if you were to point to a weak link, and again, I'm not trying to throw shade at Cody Burns, but I do think if you point to a weak link in terms of where could you have made an upgrade on the prior coaching staff, I think the wide receiver spot would have been the one thrown out there, though I don't think it was bad. Don't hear me wrong. Will Kelsey Pope change that? I don't know. We will have to see, but Tennessee does have a new wide receivers coach by the name of Kelsey Pope. We got Twitter Tuesday coming up. Tons and tons of questions that I'm going to get into answering that you guys are throwing out there. Really, really do appreciate that. But before we get into Twitter Tuesday, I want to remind you guys about StatHero. Man, do I love March Madness. I love those brackets, and I can't remember the last time, though, that I actually went deep or won some money. Is that you? I'm hedging my bets this year with StatHero's NCAA Pick'ems contest. StatHero's NCAA single-game Pick'ems pits the star players against one another in an amazing hybrid between fantasy and sports gambling. Take control back from those handicappers that always seem to have the advantage. Start focusing on the players you know best with a gameplay that doesn't rely on big spreads, large odds, or those funky props. StatHero gives you the advantage, resulting in their games winning 4 times more often. Why? Because StatHero eliminates the mystery about who or what you're going up against. In addition to their pick'em games, they also have dozens of lineups that you can comb through to take on the head-to-head. They simply post sets of players for you to take on with the set of players that you choose. StatHero is the easiest and fastest way to get your sports action fix. The simple, sleek gameplay that you have that you're going to be playing in just a few minutes. This is daily fantasy. It's what it was meant to be, okay? So sign up today for free right now. Go to stathero.com/lockedon for 100% deposit match. That's stathero.com/lockedon for a 100% deposit match. One more time, stathero.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions do apply. Thanks so much for making Locked On Vols your first listen each and every day. Now make sure to check out the Locked On Bracket Breakdown March the 14th right here on the Locked On Vols podcast channel and the YouTube channel. College basketball experts Chris Gordy, Andy Patton, and betting expert Lee Sterling will give you the in-depth breakdown on every single matchup. That is the Bracket Breakdown on March the 14th right here on your Locked On Vols podcast feed. I'm Eric Kane. Welcome back into a Tuesday show. Tuesday, you know what that means? It is Twitter Tuesday time, and let's go ahead and get started with Tim. Tim chimes in, says, easy one. How far do the Vols go in the tournaments, SEC and NCAA? Or I guess you could do a key factor for how big of a run they make type of topic. You could talk about both the Vols and the Lady Vols. Well, of course, the Lady Vols in the SEC tournament already concluded. They bowed out in the semifinals to Kentucky, and Kentucky went ahead and shocked number 1 South Carolina on Sunday. So that is very interesting. So point blank, I'll be brief here with the Lady Vols. And this is not to try to throw any shade at Kelly Harper or anything like that, because boy, she's been dealt a hand this year, right? I just don't think with the absence of Green, with the absence of Horston. I mean, you already didn't have Marta Suarez all season long. I mean, that's nothing new. I get that, but gosh, it's been tough. It's been tough for the Lady Vols here this year. And so I think it doesn't have the makeup to go deep in the tournament, in my opinion. Now, is this a Sweet 16 team? Potentially. It wouldn't shock me if this is a Sweet 16 team, but anything beyond that would kind of surprise me a little bit, simply because you're out one of the best players in and not only the SEC, but in the country, Jordan Horston, and you're out your key person off the bench, and you have been for quite some time. So you got Ray Burrell, who's coming along. You got Alexis Dye, who's coming along. You've got Tamari Key, who is just a stalwart there in the middle in terms of blocks and defense. But I look at Sweet 16 for Lady Vols. I think all things considered this season, if you get to the Sweet 16, I mean, don't be happy about it. Don't celebrate it. But I mean, that'd be a good run, in my opinion, for the Lady Vols. And I know a lot of diehard Lady Vol fans and old school Lady Vol fans, you're saying, no, that's unacceptable. Well, I understand it, but hey, times are changing. Pat Summitt's not here anymore. And just the injury situation with the Lady Vols, it just kind of is what it is. Let's shift to the men. Getting started in the SEC tournament later this week. It'll take on the winner of South Carolina and Mississippi State on Friday at 6 o'clock. And ultimately, the way the bracket is set up, if Tennessee wins on Friday, it will likely take on Kentucky on Saturday. Kentucky will play the winner of Alabama, and Alabama will play the winner of either Georgia or Vanderbilt. So the winner of Georgia or Vanderbilt will play Alabama. The winner of that game will take on Kentucky. The winner of that game will take on whoever Tennessee beats on Friday, or whoever wins the game between Tennessee on Friday. Point being, for Tennessee to go to Sunday in the tournament final, it's got to go through Kentucky. So it's going to be challenging. It's hard to play. It's hard to beat a team twice in 1 year. Both of these teams have had their way with one another on their home courts. This is a neutral site. You beat Kentucky, you're probably taking on Auburn. If not Auburn, probably Arkansas. So kind of the same 4 teams we're all talking about. For Tennessee, this is a team that has not won a tournament championship since the mid-'70s. It has been quite some time. I believe 1976, the last time Tennessee has won a tournament championship. It's won a couple of SEC regular season titles, don't get me wrong, but tournament championships. So, we'll have to see. Is Tennessee talented enough to win the whole dang thing? Absolutely. We'll talk a little bit more about this later in Twitter Tuesday. Will it travel in terms of the shot selections and all that? We'll see. I'll look at Tennessee as winning Friday, maybe not winning on Saturday. But again, you still have the NCAA tournament to go, and it's all about matchups. Tournaments are all about matchups, all about who gets hot. And we'll have to see it. The selection show for both the men and the women are going to be March 13th. The men will be at 6 o'clock. The women will be at 8 o'clock. So we'll have a better feeling when we see the bracket and kind of what the path to a Sweet 16 Elite Eight will look like for Tennessee. But bottom line, Tennessee's talented enough to beat anybody in the country. Tennessee's beat some of the best teams in the country. It's, can your shooting travel away from home? And that's been an issue at points and times this year. So, Tim, I appreciate that very much. Let's go to Jay Grass. Hey, Kane, hope you're doing well. I read for Twitter that 2023 4-star tight end Ethan Davis is perhaps, he's a Tennessee commit, by the way, is perhaps playing basketball in addition to football. He is at the high school level. Don't know much about him as a basketball player, but it seems like he's had some SEC basketball offers. He has been coveted by some Power 5 schools that wanted to play basketball. Do you know anything about this basketball game? Do you think that he'll take up a scholarship spot or be a walk-on? Curious if you know anything about this. Well, to be short, I haven't heard anything about this. He has not mentioned, to my knowledge, anything about wanting to play basketball at the University of Tennessee along with football. He was a late bloomer in football. They changed their offense. I believe he played football as a freshman, then stopped and played football last year. A late bloomer. They changed their offense, and he's a really talented pass-catching tight end, big guy. He was on campus this past weekend. Haven't heard anything about him wanting to do both in college. If so, it's great to say they can, but ultimately when you get here on campus, likely that's never the case. I'm just going to be completely honest with you. So I would not expect that here at Tennessee. When I've spoken to him, he said nothing about playing basketball here at the University of Tennessee. Appreciate it, man. We'll go to Walnuts. Walnuts ask, what do you think personally is the realistic ceiling for Vol hoops? What will determine an early exit and what will determine a deep run? Good question. Kind of like what I was saying a moment ago. Can the shooting travel? Tennessee has struggled to shoot the basketball on the road at points and times this year. Tennessee has not showed out too well at neutral sites. Tennessee's not showed out a couple times in road games. Can you travel? Can you be unselfish and tally some assists and limit the turnovers? Tennessee against Arkansas in that second half were just pathetic in terms of turnovers. I can't remember if I said this on yesterday's show or not, but I'll say it again regardless. Tennessee had 9 turnovers in the second half. Tennessee had 9 made shots in the second half. That's not a winning formula. Actually, I did say it because that's what I said whenever I got done with it. That's not a winning formula whatsoever. Limit the turnovers. Shoot the basketball well like you're at home and you're undefeated at Thompson Bowling Arena, and we'll see what happens. Also, free throw shooting. Big factor, along with, crashing the boards and rebounding the basketball like you did prior to Saturday's win against Arkansas. Rebound the basketball, make your free throws. Things that Tennessee has struggled to do at points and times this year, especially the free throws from Tennessee star player Kennedy Chandler. Last one, we'll go to Trevor. Tennessee is one, and this is kind of going into what I was saying. Tennessee's 1-2 in neutral site games, 6-5 in true road games. Should fans expect the same struggles in the SEC and NCAA tournaments, or is enough time passed that they figured it out? Yeah, Trevor, again, I wouldn't say enough time's passed that they figured it out. Excuse me. I wouldn't say that this is be all end all. Because Tennessee has shot well on the road at points and times, but Tennessee did not against Texas Tech. Tennessee did not against Texas. Tennessee did not against Villanova. Tennessee did not at Arkansas. It's been ugly before, right? So there is some worry there. I'm not going to lie, at least on my end. I mean, it's a neutral site, sure. It's not a true road game, sure. But Tennessee has struggled. So I wouldn't say that enough time has passed because, again, it was just a couple weeks ago Tennessee was at Arkansas and just couldn't find water if it fell out of a boat. The second half against Georgia, Tennessee struggled there, trying to close that game out. So that's a worry for me. I'm not going to lie. Can Tennessee continue to shoot the basketball well in a neutral side game because they'll continue to be neutral sites the rest of the way? We'll find out, man. It's been a fun season. It was not fun. I think I said on this podcast, watching this basketball team is just brutal. I think I said that back in January. Thank goodness they got much better and they started figuring out and they started evolving because it has been a lot of fun to watch this basketball team, especially how they've adapted after losing, Olivier Nkamhoua and stuff. But nonetheless, that is a concern. Tennessee's overcome it before. Can you overcome it the rest of the way? You're looking at 6 in the NCAA tournament games to go and win the whole dang thing. You're looking at 3 in the SEC tournament to win the whole dang thing. So a total of 9 potentially left, 9 games potentially left altogether. We'll see if obviously that's more realistic about 7 or 8 games or maybe even 6 games, but we will find out for sure. All right, guys, appreciate you timing in. We'll get to one more Twitter Tuesday question when we return here for another segment of Locked On Vols, plus a little bit about the non-traditional spring game that's going to happen here or here in just a couple of weeks for this edition of spring practice. So more on that here in just a moment. But March Madness, it's here, man. We're talking about Tennessee traveling and shooting well on the road. That means you need to start thinking now about where you're going to be running your brackets. Are you going for the usual or are you going for the best? We've done our homework, and we're going to run our brackets through RunYourPool.com. Along with the standard brackets, RunYourPool offers game types like survivors and pick'ems. They have options to edit scoring. They offer more intel on your picks, more so than what those ESPN and CBS brackets do as well. And so I think that's very, very key. And if you got a business, RunYourPool can help take some of that madness magic alongside your employees or even going up against some of your customers and your clients. Clearly, we believe in RunYourPool because, like I said, we're running our brackets through them. There's no truer test than that. If you want to play against us for a shot at a cash prize, join us at runyourpool.com/lockedon. And while you're there, create your own pool for family and friends. Enter Pure Madness at checkout for $10 off your customer pool. All the rules and details will be made available there. That's runyourpool.com/lockedon. Enter Pure Madness for a chance to win a cash prize. We look forward to seeing and beating you there. And plus, BetOnline, football might be over. Basketball's in the tough stretch here of March Madness. Full steam ahead for pro and college hoops teams from the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where the next coach fire might land. BetOnline.net, your number one spot for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball like I'm talking about now. It's not just football like we're usually talking about. BetOnline's got all types of sports like boxing, UFC, hockey, had Olympic coverage whenever the US of A was over in Beijing. So what I want you to do right now is head on over to the website today or sign up on your mobile device. Learn more about the latest actions, all the latest trends, everything that betonline.net has to offer. BetOnline.net. It is where the game starts. All right, we got one more segment left here on a Tuesday show. That's Twitter Tuesday here on Locked On Vols. Thanks so much for making Locked On Vols your first listen and for subscribing on the YouTube channel. You guys are awesome. Really, really do appreciate that. We'll move on here. Last Twitter Tuesday question before we get into some other news. We got Eric on the Facebook page. I'm also on Facebook. You can follow me at Canner on Air. This is from Eric. With Pope's resume much shorter than most wide receiver coaches in the Power 5 football, does that hurt Tennessee with high school or transfer prospects? Good question, Eric. I touched on it a little bit earlier in the show, but in terms of transfers or recruiting, traditional recruiting, I don't think so. I mean, listen, if there is a big-time high school prospect that Tennessee's trying to bring in, and by the time they sign with the University of Tennessee, it is a team effort. Sure, you want to have a good relationship with the guy that's going to be instructing you every single day. You want to have a good relationship with the guy that's going to be coaching you up. It'd be great if that guy had a resume as long as tall as you were, right? I mean, that's what Rodney Gardner's got going for him. Prospects love Rodney Gardner. They say, man, he's been doing it longer than I've been alive. He's got guys in the NFL all the time. Kelsey Pope doesn't have that resume, but Kelsey Pope knows the system. Kelsey Pope has been here. Kelsey Pope also has Josh Heupel that's helping him. Kelsey Pope also has Alex Golish that's helping him. So I think we're going to find out. We'll see. Again, I don't know much about Kelsey Pope as a recruiter. Obviously, he doesn't have much experience doing it. I don't know what his role was previously before getting the promotion. Again, I didn't hear his name an awful lot, but that doesn't mean he wasn't working, right? Prospects often talk to a lot of staffers, but if they talk to a coach like Coach, Jerry Mack or Rodney Gardner or Brian John Marie, they're going to mention them because they're actual coaches, right? So nonetheless, we will have to see. But in terms of transfers too, again, that's so many times that's a Heupel game, right? That doesn't mean he's not the only one working. But again, if you were going to choose the University of Tennessee, you're going to choose it a lot more for just a position coach, in my opinion, especially if you're a transfer, because if you're transferring, likely it's last call time, right? You're going to transfer to Tennessee because of the offense, because of the opportunity, because of a chance to get developed and go to the National Football League. Kelsey Pope plays a factor into that, don't get me wrong, but also, Josh Heupel in this offense does. So to answer your question, long story short, I don't think it's going to hurt, especially considering where Kelsey Pope was. I mean, it's not like Kelsey Pope's resume was much better. Sure, he had been in the SEC for quite some time coaching at Auburn. He played in the SEC, so it is better on paper. I'm not trying to diminish that, but it's not like it's much better to answer your question. So that's kind of how I would answer that question, Eric. Hopefully I gave you something there. All right. So I mentioned over to conclude the show yesterday, a little bit about Junior Day. I said that there would be a write-up, a video of some sorts at VolQuest.com. And then as soon as I posted and scheduled the podcast to get going here for yesterday morning, it was up at VolQuest.com that night. But nonetheless, 5-star quarterback Nico Iamaleava. All right, so he looks like he loved his time in Tennessee this weekend. Austin Price was able to catch up with him, do a little video, and, he's cool cat, right? Wearing sunglasses in the video, going to basketball games, having the student section chant his name, taking the cool pictures with Golish and Halsey and Heupel. I mean, he was living his best life, right? That's nothing new. I mean, that's going to be the treatment for him when he goes to any other school like Oregon, and he continues on with his SEC tour of slate. Wherever Arch Manning doesn't sign, Nico Iamaleava will sign probably. So, and that doesn't mean Tennessee's out of. What I'm meaning is Georgia and Alabama are very much in it. Excuse me, for Arch Manning. They're in it for Nico as well, but those schools aren't going to sign both of them, right? So that kind of cuts the list down there a little bit. But he'll be on his Southeastern Conference swing before heading back up to California. Oregon's the favorites, all intents and purposes. Tennessee did very well this weekend, having a chance to get his mother and his sister here. I think was big for him. He mentioned that in the video. I think he had a good time. So Tennessee's certainly in this one for sure. And we'll have to see exactly how the next few weeks go before he makes a decision sometime late spring or early summer. But Nico Iamaleava, big weekend for the University of Tennessee. Pain in the Rock as well. I think Tennessee did well there. We will go on to the Tennessee men's basketball team. Moved up 4 spots in the latest AP poll, up from 13 to number 9. Now a top 10 team to head into postseason play. 3rd team from the SEC. Of course, Auburn's number 4. Kentucky is number 5. Tennessee is number 9. Arkansas slipped back to number 15, just one spot. We're ranked 14th, but losing to Tennessee, that was a spot ahead of them, drops back to 15, and that is the only teams ranked inside the top 25 from the SEC. The Big Four is what we've been calling them all year. Tennessee now ending the season, heading into postseason play as a top 10 team. Lady Vols, meanwhile, have slipped back one spot from number 18 to number 19, losing in the semis to Kentucky, who went on to upset number 1 South Carolina. So Lady Vols are number 19. Both of these teams have been in the AP top 25 all season long. It's truly, that is kind of a really unique stat because not many teams can say that both about their men's and their women's program. You've got the Tennessee baseball team that came out with the polls earlier on Monday. Tennessee is a top 10 team in pretty much every poll with the exception of Baseball America, where Tennessee slides into number 11. But Tennessee baseball has been ranked number 10 in D1 baseball's poll, number 3 in collegiate baseball's poll, number 4 in USA Today coaches poll, and number 6 in perfect games poll. So a top 10 team in 4 polls, just sitting on the outside of number 11 for Baseball America. So a good start there for Tennessee, as it'll have a 2-game set here in the midweek against James Madison before welcoming in Rhode Island this weekend for 3 games before SEC play begins here in a couple of weeks. And then that brings me to the final thing on the docket here today. Tennessee is going to have an all Vols weekend. What that means is there's not going to be a spring game, a traditional spring game, because of the renovations to Neyland Stadium. That's out of the question. Because of the Garth Brooks concert at Nissan Stadium, it's out of the question. I think UT Chattanooga was explored a little bit, but there were some conflicts there as well. So really, there wasn't a venue to where you could really hold, 30 to, probably 45,000 fans to come in and watch your orange and white game. And so there's not going to be a traditional orange and white game this year. However, there's going to be an all Vols type weekend. So Tennessee's administration has kind of put it up and been kind of working on this. It's going to be starting on Thursday. There's a lot of home athletic events that weekend, and here's what the schedule is going to be. Thursday, April the 7th, you have all-day track and field Tennessee relays at Tom Black Track. That's on campus. On Friday, you'll have that same track meet. At noon, you're going to have women's tennis against Vanderbilt. At 6:30, you will begin a 3-game home SEC slate against Missouri. On Saturday, you'll have that track meet again at 12 to 3 at Volunteer Village. There'll be a fan fest at the Humanities Plaza in Circle Park. At 1 o'clock, you'll have a soccer game. At 7 o'clock, you'll have the baseball game against Missouri. Sunday, you'll have women's tennis. And at 1 o'clock, you'll have baseball as well. So what's going to happen at that Volunteer Village? This is Saturday from 12 to 3 at the Volunteer Village. Fans are going to be welcome, and there's going to be 2 big screens that will carry Tennessee football's 1 o'clock scrimmage on Saturday, April the 9th. In addition to live interviews, head coach Josh Heupel, VFLs, and other guests on the screen, Volunteer Village will showcase food trucks, music, activities for all ages from noon to 3 on Saturday. So you're not going to be in attendance for an orange and white game, but there's going to be a little bit of a scrimmage that's going to be shown at 1 o'clock, and Josh Heupel will take the mic, VFLs, and other guests will talk to fans there as well. So, all intents and purposes, it's not great in my opinion, but it is something, and it's the Tennessee administration showing that they're trying to do something to create kind of a fan atmosphere, a fanfare, if you will, given the circumstances. So construction recently began on the Anderson Training Center, which is undergoing a $30 million upgrade and expansion. The Anderson Training Center has served as the exclusive home for Vol football since 2019. The student-athlete-centric project will include additional 36,000 square feet and renovate nearly 100,000 square feet of existing space. And of course, renovations are also underway at Neyland Stadium. 2 new video boards on the north and south end zones of the stadium, the Lower West Premium Club, enhanced chairback seating in multiple lower level sections, and a party deck for social gathering space on the stadium's upper and north end. So a lot of things happening on campus right now. Not going to be a traditional spring game in the sense, but there will be an all-Vol weekend beginning Thursday, April the 7th through Sunday, April the 10th. Tailgates. You'll get to see some of Tennessee's scrimmage, kind of fanfare activities, baseball games, all that and more. That is the consolation prize. So wanted to get that out there, and we'll see what happens there. I mean, again, it's I know a lot of you guys are looking forward to the spring game. But this, I guess, would just be kind of the best case scenario since it was just kind of out of the question. So that'll do it here for a Tuesday show. Thanks so much for taking your time and checking us out here on Locked On Vols. Making Locked On Vols your first listen each and every day. Now for your second listen, Locked On NFL Draft. Ryan Tracy, Eric Crocker. They bring the NFL Draft to life every single day, talking about the teams, the front offices, and more. Check out Locked On NFL Draft wherever you get your podcast, completely free and available everywhere. Make that your second listen behind Locked On Vols, which obviously is your first listen. Continue to support the show on YouTube. Please subscribe if you haven't already to the YouTube channel. Just search Locked On Vols. Guys, thank you. I appreciate you. We'll do it again tomorrow on a Wednesday. But until then, enjoy the rest of your Tuesday, everybody.